is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to episode 265 of the Rebel Author Podcast. Today, I'm talking to Kristina Stanley and Lucy Cooke, returning Rebels, but this time we're talking all about the secrets of writing a series. But first to some comments, and just one on Dave Cohen's episode from Matt Goodall. A, the fact that that fact about the Thames basically being an open sewer was revolting. And B, what an incredible world-building tip. Work out where the garbage goes in and where it goes out, and then you build your world around that. Fantastic. So, in personal news and updates then, I feel like every week is like a week. I've been a bit reflective this week. So, obviously, I sent the book off to the editor last week. It was the day after I recorded the last episode. And it is now Wednesday, the 16th of October. And I am feeling unmoored. What do I mean by unmoored? Well, this is the first time since pretty much I started writing that I hadn't already pre-decided what the next thing would be before I finished the previous thing. So I just feel completely unanchored. Like I am still, okay, so I'm pretty sure I know what's coming next, but I haven't set competition focus achiever on it and kind of locked it in, if that makes sense. And I think some of the reason for that is the desire to give myself enough space my brain can stop swelling. But of course I fight myself because I like being busy. I don't like dead space or downtime. And those are probably all of the things that I actually need at the moment. So where am I at? I have a few things that I need to polish off for the Kickstarter. So for example, next week I will be drafting smutterlogs and narrating them and editing them. I've got London Comic Con next week. And then after that, and of course I've got to finish my Vegas presentation and do some sort of reach out and organise some meetings and stuff in Vegas. And then after that, I am pretty much free until Vegas. So I'll probably have almost 2 weeks free. And I think that, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I don't think I'm going to put anything in. I think that I'm going to allow myself to read, to input, to brainstorm, to make mood boards, to outline, and to just give myself the space to do those things. And I say that, and I already know that there is a list as long as my fucking arm of stuff that needs doing. So it may be that I don't actually get any of that time because, I've got another VAT return that's due. I still need to finish off do you know what? I don't need to list it. It's a long, boring life list, but there's a lot of stuff that needs doing that is in and around the business. And so I don't know. I live in this naive, vain hope that I will get a couple of weeks of just lounging around reading and outputting and mood boarding and all the rest of it. I don't know. I'm hoping for at least a week of that before I go to Vegas, but we shall see. So that is why I think this week is going to be a little bit shorter, because I don't feel like I can tell you what I'm up to because I don't even know. I have this feeling that since last year, since February, when I published the first Ruby book, I have just been on a treadmill sprinting as hard and fast as I can, and I need to just take a hot second. I don't want to take huge amounts of time, but even a couple of days just to breathe. Apparently you guys all know this about me, and I didn't have a clue. But there we go. Yes, that is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be trying to give myself the time between now and when I go to Vegas to finish off all the jobs and to just breathe, so that when I come back from Vegas, I can then settle into hardcore outlining and getting on with the next scene. The other major thing that I'm trying to do in this space, or sort of now-ish, there's no hard deadline on it, is to plan. And I'm having a really fucking tough time planning. There are, surprising no one, There are a million things that I want to do next year. And of course, I have worked super hard to get away from the point where I have no space to breathe because I'm doing all the things. And yes, okay, now there's a team and I can get the team to do some of the stuff, but it's also about like, you know, prioritizing and figuring out what exactly I want this business to look like. And it's really hard. Like, my activator is dying because I'm having to like slow down and like write shit down and like do a little bit of journaling and also talk it out, because I do so much processing externally in terms of that kind of thinking. So I had a chat with my work wife this morning, and it was supposed to be a planning session, and both of us were kind of laughing at the end because we did absolutely fuck all planning. And I think it's because we're both in this really strange place. And yeah, so planning is really hard at the moment. It's the thing I'm craving the most, because my strategic, I guess, but quite a few of my strengths really like that structure. And yet I'm not a very structured person innately. Like I struggle to create structure around myself. And also because I'm so wildly optimistic about what I can actually achieve, hashtag a competition. And it's such a distant cry from what reality is that you know, through all of the, you know, I guess therapy and coaching and all the rest of it, I now stand much closer to reality. So there's like this discordant sensation of like what I want my goals to be and what I know is reality. So yeah, I'm going to have a planning session on Friday and another sort of coaching session tomorrow night. And I've got to spend some of this afternoon writing things down and trying to get clear what my goals are. Who knew that would be such a hard thing? I have never struggled to create a goal. And that's another reason that I feel so unmoored, because what the goals that I thought would be unachievable have been achieved. And so then what do you do? What then becomes the goal that you strive for? And for me in particular, I really like unrealistic goals. But because all of these changes have happened so quickly, the unrealistic goals that I'm looking at now feel so wildly unrealistic because my brain is still trying to catch up with the reality of where I am and how much I've achieved in the last year. So I'm like, oh, of course we can't possibly have those as unrealistic goals. But of course everybody knows, you know, with manifestation and stuff, you have to act as if those are already, you know, your reality. And so it's about leveling up that belief and accepting that those are the goals, I suppose. Yeah, okay, this is really happening. Guys, you were amazing. Thanks for this. I should like pay you for this therapy. But you can say, here is me, live external processing to you on the Rebel Author podcast. So yeah, I think actually that might be the problem. I feel like I have had this growth that has been so quick that I'm still suffering a little bit from the whiplash and trying to process what comes next. So that is what I'm going to be spending my afternoon doing. Isn't it exciting? I feel so fucking privileged to be in this position and so excited for next year because like, oh my God, what is possible now, you know? We are already in the background. Do you know what? Okay, so this is the other thing that I'm having a bit of a panic about. So the Kickstarter, did it finish last time? It must have. I think it finished last time I recorded. What is time? Time is a lie. But we have now added up the number of books. It is 1,139 individual books across, obviously, like multiple various different options. So signing tip-ins isn't going to be particularly easy because it's, you know, like 60 of this, 500 of that, and, you know, so on and so forth. So I think I have to sign the physical books. But signing nearly 1,200 books, it's going to take a little bit of time. So I don't know how we're going to fulfill this thing yet. That is a fun problem to have. I am a little bit excited, a little bit terrified, quite concerned for my wrists, I have to say. And also the logistical fulfillments of like, how the fuck do we pack that many things up? How do we do it? Thankfully, Book Vault are amazing and they're going to fulfill a good portion of it, but we still have to put like the what's it called? The print sheet? No, picking sheet, like the sheet with the address and the, you know, with the right book and stuff. So I'm currently recruiting people to help because So I don't know how we're going to do it. So that's an exciting problem to have. Anyway, all of the things, but we're also looking at the next Kickstarter, and oh my fucking God, we've just had some of the proofs for the covers. Like, we're still in iterations. They're not done. They're not quite right yet, but the potential is there, and holy shit, we are leveling up this Kickstarter, and I cannot wait to tell you guys all about it. Okay, I think I've probably waffled on for long enough. So one last quick announcement, actually, whilst I remember. We have changed the launch date for House of Crimson Curses. So one of the big things that I want to do next year is get a year ahead, which is why I'm going to try and write the next trilogy or duet or whatever it ends up being back to back, and then have a break and then spend the rest of the year writing the following year's books. But in order to do that, I needed to clear off everything from this year. So House of Crimson Curses is now going to be released on the 5th of December. We will be telling everybody tomorrow, as this airs, that it is coming on the 5th of December. We will be finishing off the Kickstarter, delivering the Kickstarter digitally in November, and then all of the physical stuff won't be shipped until January, purely because we just don't want to hit the Christmas postage stuff, because we don't want anything to get lost or for it to take forever to arrive. And so because of that, we are going to do all the packing and signing and everything before Christmas, but then we're going to wait until January, the first week of January, and then we're going to ship everything out to everybody. So that's it. That is my updates. The Rebel of the Week this week is Joe. Joe says, this story happened over a decade ago. I was in college and had just been dumped by my boyfriend for another girl, but he still wanted to control me, manipulative person that he was. So he tried to convince me that we were still friends and that the new girl could be my new best friend. What the fuck? Oh my God. At the same time, I found out that I was pregnant with his child. He wanted me to keep the child and tell people that it was the product of a stranger I'd met at a party. Never mind that I'd never been to a party in my life, nor had I ever slept with anyone else. But I knew I couldn't be chained to him forever. I began to see what an awful person he was and how blind I'd been. And I mustered up the courage and rebelled hard. Living in the Bible Belt of the southern United States, I had very few options available to me. After a few attempts with different clinics, I managed to find one that I could afford that would perform an abortion for me. Once I was no longer pregnant, I dyed my hair red, cut it short, turned vegetarian, and started wearing form-fitting clothes, all things he had previously forbid me from doing. I also started writing smut. Yes, you did! Although I didn't publish, and generally learning how to be my own person again. Now I am happily married with the family I chose to have, and I could never have done it without that first big rebellion. That is fucking epic. I love that rebellion so much. Good for you. If you would like to be a Rebel of the Week, please do send in your story. It can be any kind of rebellion. You can email your rebel story to Becca over on rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. And we are always in need. So please, if you are sitting on a little itty bitty rebellion, please do send it in. New patrons this week, but a big, huge, enormous thank you to all of my existing patrons. If you would like to support the show and get early access to all of the episodes, as well as bonus content, you can from as little as $2 a month by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. That's it from me this week. Let's get on with the episode. Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author Podcast. Today I have returning superstars Kristina Stanley and Lucy Cooke. Kristina is an award-winning author and fiction editor. She is the founder and CEO of Fictionary. Lucy is a Fictionary certified story coach editor. And Fictionary is software for creative writers looking to improve the plot, characters, and settings of their novels. Together, Lucy and Kristina co-authored Secrets to Editing Success, Secrets to Outlining a Novel, and Secrets to Writing a Series. And you can find out more about both of them using all of the links and info that will be jam-packed in the show notes. So hello guys, welcome back.
Hello.
Hello, Sasha. I just love you. You introduced us as superstars.
You are superstars. You especially. Sorry, Lucy, just for a
No.
second. But Chris, this is Christina's fourth appearance on the show, which is an actual record. So you now hold the record of most frequently returning Rebel. I hope you've got another Rebel story up your sleeve. But for people who haven't listened to the previous episodes, I am going to link all three of them in the show notes. One was episode 4, which was on self-editing. One was episode 87, which was on how editors edit. And then the last, most recent one, which was still in February 2023, so well over a year ago, was episode 176 on secrets to editing success. So usually I ask people about their journeys, but instead I'm going to ask you guys, what have you been doing since February 2023? It's almost 18 months. So yeah, what have you guys
Yeah.
been up to?
Oh, so Lucy and I have been so busy. So we're on our third book together, fourth book we're writing now, but we've got our third published, which is Secrets to Writing a Series. And so it took us a year to research it. We have just read hundreds of series. And when you start reading series, there's a lot of books. It's not just reading the one. You got to go through and see the patterns and everything going on. So, and basically what we're doing together, so Lucy's the head of community and training at Fictionary. And as we write a book, we also introduce a course with it. So we've got course material through the book, and then we do Fictionary Live, which is live training courses. So we spent a lot of time together, I think, right, Lucy?
We spend a lot of time together researching and talking books, and more books. So it's so exciting.
I know, I love my job. We have to talk about books and we have to read them. It's just fantastic.
This is completely not relevant to, I mean, well, it is relevant, but for both of you in your reading and research for this book, what was your favorite standout series? Just pick one that you both really enjoyed. It could be the same, or it could be different.
They're so,
I know it's the
so
most awful
many.
question, isn't it?
It's really hard because there's so many great authors out there that it's easy to miss somebody. So I'm going to say it this way. For me, reading across the genres of fantasy series, romance series, mystery series, what have you, made me realize that for me, the strength of the story is more important than the genre. And so I love it. Some of the series we've been reading aren't even finished yet. There's only book 1 and book 2 published. You're like, I need book 3 now. So if I have to pick one, I'm going to choose The Hunger Games for its structural brilliance. Like it's just phenomenal, and there's no way around it. When you edit it from a structural perspective, for that reason.
Lucy?
Well, Christina's chosen one type of series, which we'll get to in a bit, but I love the other side, and I love series that are just open-ended. I love them, and I really fell in love with Bridgerton. I know it's really trendy and everything else to like, but technically, from the structural point of view, it is marvelous, and it deserves every single accolade it gets because it's so brilliantly done. I absolutely adore it. Just from structure, it's amazing.
I finished Bridgerton series 3 last night, and I think it was my favorite. And this is really interesting for me because when I watched season 1, I was like, no, nothing's going to top that. Then I watched season 2 and was like, oh, I don't know, maybe this is going to top it, but it was different. Season 3 felt like cozy historical romance, not the intense enemies to lovers that we had like in the first 2 seasons. And I think because it was about a writer, like I actually cried last night. I was like, my wife was like, are you due on? And I was like, no, fuck off. I was like, I'm just crying because it was good and she said beautiful things. Anyway, so I think it's really interesting that you've both covered like the different types of series. So I think that's probably a really good place to start because there are different types of series. So can you maybe in your own definitions that you guys have used, explain the different types of series, what kind of their structures are, what they look like, where you might find them?
Yes, we can. So I'll start with close, but just leading into it, as we put together our book, we wanted to make sure that every chapter, the author has an actionable thing to take away. Like, what do you actually do? And so we started looking at the series of, what types there are, and then what decisions do you have to make for each of those series, because it's really difficult to move forward if you don't have a starting point of knowing whether you're writing a closed series, which I'm going to talk about in a second, or an open series. And those start all of your decisions. And if you can go through and make those decisions and then start writing, you're going to be way more efficient and faster than just, pantsering a whole series is really difficult versus one book, because you need to know the ending, or you need to know where you're going. What's the connecting thing between these series? And so reading all these books, we thought, there's a really simple thing at the very beginning. There's basically two types of series. One's a closed series, and that means it starts in book 1 of the series and the story ends in the final book of the series, whether it's 2, 3, 5, 7, 12, doesn't matter. There's one story across and then an individual story in each book. And on the open, it's different. It's like Stephanie Plum. She's the crazy Bond. What's her job? Bond person. She goes after criminals, book after book after book after book. So she's the character through the book. It's a series in the sense that this is her job. This is what she does repeatedly, but not in the sense that there's one story across the entire series.
Where do you put interconnected standalones like romance, where it's 7 brothers in a small town?
Oh, Lucy's going to talk about that, because that is what Bridgerton is, right? It's an open series with I think there's 8 siblings in there, is one to the next to the next. So that's that one. So when we look at a closed series, it just means that there'll be one story arc across the entire series. So the Hunger Games, Katniss must take down the Capitol. Otherwise, her and all of her friends are dead, or going to live a life of misery. That's the series goal. And her book 1 story arc is just Katniss must survive the Hunger Games or she dies. That's it. And so it's book to book to book. And with the closed series, you can see the story arc that there's an inciting incident in book 1 and the climax of the series in book whatever is the last book in the series. But each book has to also be a standalone book that the reader feels like that book is, we know Katniss survived the Hunger Games. So super, you could stop then and be satisfied, but you don't want to, because you know that it's going to continue and the rest is coming. So what unites those books into a series is the plot. And those books are best read in order. So that's basically the closed. Lucy, I'm going to let you talk about open because it's your passion.
I love open series because they're so powerful. And as a writer, you can keep on writing and putting out more books that readers absolutely adore. So if you're writing as a business, then an open series is absolutely one to consider if that speaks to you. The number of novels in an open series are open-ended. It's unlimited, and that's really fantastic. The story, it's multiple single stories, but there's a uniting factor, and that uniting factor we'll talk about. The story arc is different to the closed series, which has one story that goes from book 1 to the end book, because there's a generic story arc, and this generic story arc we'll talk about later on. But that's what the reader comes back to, because they want to come back to your story of, so Sacha Black, your story of your 7 brothers or 6 brothers or 5 brothers in this same small town. They're coming back because they love it. They want to see what happens, but they want the same, but they want a different story each time. And you can get that in the how to make that happen for each one of your books. The open unites all the novels in the series by either having characters, so it's the same character, like Stephanie Plum, or it could be setting like the Bridgertons, which is the Regency in that family home with all the 8 Regency. You can also have Agatha Raisin by MC Beaton, and that's a character-led one because you're following Agatha Raisin through all of her exploits that she goes through all of the stories. So open series can also be read in any order. So you can pick up one and you can enjoy the story. It doesn't have to be read in the order that they've been published in. So that's...
In your studies, and I suspect the answer to this is no, but I'm really curious. Did you do any kind of analysis looking at market position and which type of series was more successful? And the reason that I ask this is because I've now done one of each, and I have sales data looking at the performance of both, but I don't, like, a sample size of one is not statistically significant. And I would be fascinated to know if you looked at the top 100 and looked at like how many books were part of interconnected standalones versus what are you calling them? Open and closed versus closed series. Did you do any analysis like that?
We didn't. How we chose the books that we analyzed, we looked first for commercially successful. That's we wanted to see what's out there. And then we looked at what they had in common. And the thing they have most in common is a strong structure. And so with the structure there's lots of books that maybe the prose is a bit weak, or it's not full character depth, but with the structure there, they succeed. The stories there, readers are willing to go through it. And you can see with the authors who start to really grow, their prose gets better. They know structure at the beginning, successful on that, their prose gets better, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger as an author as they go through and learn really, really how to write. So some of the trends we are seeing, so within the fantasy genre, the books with a strong romance right now do well, flat out, whether it's a mild romance or hardcore romance. That people like romance, and so that really builds up the genre. But between open and closed, not really. People like series, and once they connect, they connect.
I would love somebody like Alex Newton to go in and scrape all the data and do some analysis, because what's really interesting for me is the reason I chose interconnected standalones. One is because I was kind of burnt off of writing a closed series, but also because when you look at a lot of romance authors writing like small town contemporary or rom-coms, they're all usually interconnected standalones or standalone books. So I did that and it did well. But then this second series, I've done a trilogy closed. I have never seen pre-orders like it. Like, it is phenomenal. And part of that is about the hook at the end and the cliffhanger. But also, I just wonder if there is a natural difference in, I suppose, the push to follow through. Like, obviously, Bridgerton was super successful. So, there's obviously something hooking them through. But for whatever reason, it seems like, for me, writing trilogies or closed series is probably the way forward. I don't know.
I suspect too, though, Sasha, your writing voice is just beautiful. Your prose is fantastic. Readers love the way you write. And so, you've written enough books now. You're at over 20 books published, right? And so I think that popularity is now coming from, they like what you wrote in one series, so now they go to another series. My guess is readers don't think about whether a series is open or closed. Writers need to think about it. They need to know what they're writing. But as a reader, if you pick up one book by an author, you're like, man, I love this. You're going to the next one. And then you go, oh, they have another series. Okay, that's fine too. I don't think readers think, well, is this a closed series? I'm going to know the ending, or...
Well, I'm going to run the experiment again. So the way that I'm working now is I'm going to write after I finish the last book in this trilogy, the next one I write is one of 7 interconnected standalones that will publish either once or twice a year, depending on how many I can write. And then, so that one will publish, and then I'll write a trilogy and release that back to back. And then I'll do another interconnected standalone. So I will be curious to see the pre-orders and how that works between the two series. So I will let you know if you're interested on how that goes.
And the hook for a closed is very simple to create because it's going to go into the next story. But if you look at Bridgerton's, the way she puts hooks in structurally, it's marvelous because she'll get the voice of the next person, the next character for the next book, and she'll put it in at the end of the previous book, and then she'll refer to the book before at the beginning of the new book. It's just incredible structurally how to build in hooks for an open series, which is just that's structurally is so brilliant.
Well, and funny enough, you talk about that. That's what really fascinates me at the moment is those interconnected standalones. So I've just been binge reading Sarah Kate, who wrote the Salacious Players Club, and she did something very, very interesting. So the beginning chapter, which was really the prologue, was identical in every single book, but it was told from a different, so everybody was round the table having a conversation, and each book was told from a different character's perspective, but the dialogue was all the same. You just saw that scene from a different character. And then the last book in the series doesn't start like that, but you end with that chapter. So it was so fucking good. I haven't quite finished, but I know that's how the last book ends. But those structural quirks and uniqueness, like things that you don't often see, are the things that are now hooking me into stories.
You know, and the thing is there, Sasha, she clearly thought of that ahead of time. She didn't go, I'm going to write this book and this book and this book. She made her series decisions ahead of time. Doesn't mean you can't change them as you're writing. Of course you can. But if a writer starts from a solid foundation, they can plan something like that. And I think it helps with things like writer's block when writers get stuck. You know where you're going with this series. So you can pick any scene and just write it if you're stuck and get your creative juices flowing. But without it, I think a writer can get lost. So it's very difficult.
Let's talk a little bit about that. You've mentioned structure and knowing that before somebody starts. So what other kind of artistic decisions do people need to think about before they start writing their series?
So I'm going to talk about skeleton blurbs. Lucy's smiling because she knows this is my favorite subject. I believe this is one of the most useful tools every writer, whether you're writing a series or not, no matter what genre, this is the tool that every writer needs to start with and use it for outlining. If you outline, writing, editing, off you go. And basically all a skeleton blurb is who's the protagonist, what's their story goal, and what's at stake if they don't succeed. And so in a series, if you decide, so for a closed series, you decide your skeleton blurb for your series. So we'll just use Hunger Games for this because it's so famous and many people know it. And so this series blurb is, Katniss must become the leader of the rebellion so she can take down the Capitol. Otherwise, she and her friends die or live a life of misery. And that's the whole focus. And so everything in the 3 books is leading up to that point. And so you know what's at stake. And then you also have a skeleton blurb for book 1, book 2, book 3. And so in book 1, Katniss must survive the Hunger Games, otherwise she dies. So you can see the stakes there at book 1 is just her. In book 3, it's everybody she knows. And so the stakes increase book to book to book. So it allows a writer not only to write their series, so tension is increasing the whole way through. Each book is written so the tension goes up in book 1, it goes up in book 2, it goes up in book 3. It allows them also to, when you have a skeleton blurb, what's the protagonist's goal? Well, the climax has to, for every book, show did they achieve it or not, or the story's not over and the reader's left very unsatisfied. So at the end of book 1, if we didn't find out if Katniss survived or not, say it just stopped somewhere along the point where she's, gone with Rue and exploded all the food of the enemies. Well, you're not very satisfied, right? Because you don't know that if she survived or not, it just stopped. And that happens sometimes when writers are writing a series. And so the skeleton blurb stops that. When you have your skeleton blurb for book 1, you have to answer, did she survive or not? Very clear. Then you go on to book 2, same thing. Book 3, same thing. And in book 3, you have to answer the goal for the series story arc. And that's the skeleton blurb. So who's the protagonist? What's at stake? What's their goal and what's at stake? It's a little different for an open series. And so Lucy, we'll talk about that.
For the open series, we're always looking for the same but a different story, so that the reader's coming back because they want to have the same feelings, they want to have the same kind of story. They fell in love with that, and so what you need for this is you need to create a generic skeleton blurb. And so let's go back to the Bridgertons that we love so very much. For each story, it's the same, but it's going to be different because it's a Bridgerton family member must overcome societal obstacles, otherwise they won't find true love. And so that's where you get the each story we know is going to be hitting the romance. And so we've got what the reader wants in there, and you can build from there into the story arc and make sure that each one of the scenes has that deep structure. So the overarching story is slightly different each time, but the feels that you get from deep structure are all the same. So that's how you can, as a series writer, make sure that you're giving your readers exactly what they want before you've put your first word on the page for your first book, and you can just keep on going.
Yeah, I also think one other thing, and I haven't read the books, so you'll have to tell me if this is not in the books, but I think the reason that, I was talking to Chloe about this last night, I think the reason that I love season 3 so much is because right from season 1, Lady Whistledown was a subplot the whole way through. And the tension of that kept ratcheting up and increasing. So is that also in the books? Because that's the kind of unfinished storyline that really appeals to me.
So that's for an open series, you always want to have that each individual book has a story goal that's answered, but subplots can unite through different ones. If you read the back matter in book 1 of Bridgerton, she talks about how she came up with Lady Whistledown. So I really recommend reading that bit, because it's like, oh,
I'm not a historical fiction reader, but otherwise, and I also don't reread.
Structurally amazing.
Yeah, because and this is the other problem I had with Hunger Games. I watched the film first. I've tried 3 times to read the Hunger Games, and I just cannot read them. And it's because I've seen the films and I know what happens. Also, the voice is a little odd in Hunger Games. But I think it's obviously something from 15 years ago when that was super popular. But that's not relevant. You mentioned unity there, or uniting the books. So let's talk a little bit about that. What is series unity? Why is it important? And what are some strategies that we can use to kind of ensure that a series has that cohesion and that feel of similarity across it?
Okay, so the readers come back to reading series because they know what they're looking for. And if you think about the 3 supergroups, which are plot, character, and setting, and if you work on those, that's where you find your unity from. A closed series, like Kristina said, is that unity comes from a plot. That's one uniting plot across all the books that are in that limited number of in your series. And the series has that climax that addresses the plot question that you've got from the beginning book. And then knowing for an open series, you've got 2 choices. Are you going to base it on a character like Agatha Raisin, like Stephanie Plum, or are you going to base it on the setting? So the Bridgerton based on the setting of the Regency historical romance. And your reader keeps on coming back for that character. And so that unity, you've got to then decide, is the character going to be static across every single book in the series, or are you going to have them so that they're dynamic? So you've got Stephanie Plum, decision was made that the authors said in interviews that she wants it static, so there isn't change. Whereas in Agatha Raisin, she does develop, she does change. You've got all of those choices to make. But then in the setting, you're looking to create that immersion that they're coming back to. They want that romance in a small town. They want that feel that they got before, and they want that uniting factor, which is why they've come back to you as a writer.
Okay, let's move to framing a series, kind of the beginning, inciting incident, and the climax. Can you explain the process, I guess, of creating those, making sure we've got the right ones, and why it's so important to actually giving readers a satisfying emotional feeling at the end of a series?
Yeah, so that works also for a single novel as well. You can frame it And I'm going to give you a romance one in a second, just for it is a series, but I want to give the example of the first book. But if we look at a series itself, we go back to the skeleton blurb of who's the protagonist, what's their goal, and what's at stake. So at the end of the series, the climax answers, did they or did they not achieve that series goal? At the beginning of this series, so series very interesting from an ordinary world, particularly in a closed series. So in book 1, you have your ordinary world, you have your inciting incident. The shakeup happens. The protagonist is no longer in their ordinary world. By the end of book 2, so their ordinary world has changed. Book 2 has a different ordinary world. It has to be different because they just went through this whole event in book 1. We didn't go all the way back to page 1. Book 3 now has a different ordinary world. And so each book, they start with a new ordinary world and they have an inciting incident in each. And when you have the inciting incident in book 1 in a closed series mirror the climax in the final book in this series, it brings the whole story together. So Katniss started out just trying to feed her family. The inciting incident, the Capitol's there, and her sister gets chosen to go to the Hunger Games. Katniss steps up, and it's basically, in her mind, a death sentence for her. In the climax, she kills President Coin of the Capitol and takes down the Capitol with a nice big arrow. So she's now in control. It mirrors that in the inciting incident, she thinks that's her death sentence. And in the climax, she is the death sentence. She gives it. And so it's really satisfying to see her go from just this poor girl who's trying to feed her family to, uh-oh, now I'm going to die, to I won. And it's that mirror there. If we look in a single book, one of my favorite mirrors is romance. It's a romance story by Jasmine Guillory, and it's The Wedding Date. An opening scene, the meet cute happens. That's the inciting incident in an elevator. And then in the closing, they're in the elevator, the same elevator, and that's where they get engaged. Like, it's just such a boom mirror, and you're like, oh, it's so good. That just made me feel great. I loved it. That it's a very, if anyone here is writing romance, that's a book to read for romance structure. It's a contemporary romance, and it's very clear on the whole story arc. And so we really had fun analyzing that one.
Oh, I love it. Mirroring is one of my favorite things, like, especially when there's like a first line and last line that mirror each other. Not all authors do that because sometimes it's like scene wise a mirror. And obviously thematically we get lots of mirrors. But yeah, I love when a first and last line mirror each other. Okay. Let's talk about characters. Obviously, we've mentioned like static characters, people like Stephanie Plum and Agatha Raisin. So obviously we know that the character arcs are different. What are some tips or tricks that authors should take into account to think about creating those different types of character arcs? How can they keep their characters interesting if they're static? How can they make sure they land a dynamic character arc? Yeah, what are kind of some tips and tricks there for the different types of series and character arcs?
So for that one, I would really recommend that you go and have a look at in every single book in your open series, that you're having a look to see what happens in the story arc scenes. And those are the 5 pivotal scenes, whether or not you're writing a single story or if you're writing a series. And in an open series, each book would have them. And what you're looking for is what happens in each book to be similar structurally, but have a different experience for the reader on the superficial top level that they're reading the story at. So if we have a look at, I'm going with Bridgerton because I wanted to explain that you can use tropes in story arc scenes so that you can have the same but different there. So you could have the character going through each story and that they'll be going different. But in Bridgerton, which is a setting based one, you've got that in plot point one of each of her stories, it's the trope that is on show in that scene. So you can use tropes to help give you new stories and new ways, but keep that character static. So the Duke and I, you've got the fake dating relationship happening in plot point one, in the Viscount Who Loved Me. Enemies to lovers aspect. In book 3, you've got Benedict saves Sophie, and that's the difference, the illicit love affair, where the difference in social scales of where they are and everything else like that. And so in there you can see that the forbidden love, the story up patterns can help you create same but different each time. It's really structurally very, very, very something I'm really passionate about, seeing those patterns. But once you see how other writers can create them structurally, you can then go in and have a look at another story arc scene and say, in this story arc scene, I want them to all meet in a very similar location. And so you're bringing that unity in, but you can have them acting in a completely different way. So you've got the static character, but you've got that unity in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to add to that for a closed series. If we look at Divergent, so in a closed series, your character is going to go book to book to book, and you want to keep your character engaged. And in Divergent, in book 2, right at the opening, the author uses backstory for the character growth. And so you learn in plot point 2 of book 1, Tris, her mother dies, her boyfriend is taken captive, and she kills her friend Will. So it's pretty bad plot point 2. Like, that's about as low as you're going to go. Right in the opening, she's thinking about you wake up and she's shot Will. That's the first thing she shares. So she's taken plot points from the previous book and used it to show character growth, motivation, any troubles they're having right out of the plot points. And so if you use that about your character from book 1, just look in your plot point scenes and go, what happened in those scenes? That's what the reader needs to remember for book 2 and then for book 3. And they just fall in love with the characters because of that.
So let's talk about Divergent, because never have I ever been so cross with a book series as I have Divergent. One of the primary reasons I started writing is because I lobbed the book across the room. I did not believe. Okay, so listeners, spoiler alert. I mean, the book's been out like 20 fucking years, so if you haven't read it by now, too bad. But at the end of the last book of the Divergent series, Tris, the main character, dies, and I was so not expecting that ending that I got to the end of the book and was confused why we hadn't I just thought she'd passed out or something. But no, she actually kills her off. And I was so cross. That is one of the reasons I started writing, because I was like, well, I can do better than this. Like, who the hell kills off the protagonist? And that, honestly, like the Keeper's books definitely has inspiration from Divergent, because I was so cross about it. But I think that is how not to land a series. And she got slated for that ending. So do you want to maybe talk about any endings that you saw in your research that did fuck up?
So that's the big one, right? Like, clearly she made that decision for some reason. And with that, I think she had to go to a dual point of view combined protagonist in book 3, because she needed Tobias there to carry the end of the story. You can't kill off the protagonist if they're the only point of view, because once they're dead, they're dead. Unless you're the protagonist is living on in some other world or something. But in a book where when they die, you need someone other than the protagonist. So structurally, Divergent is great. Subjectively, the ending's hard to take. And so, I think for me, analyzing it.
Well, here's the thing. I spoke to Gail Carragher about this series, and she writes about the heroine's journey. And what she said, the reason people felt so cheated is that it was a heroine story series that ended with a hero's journey ending. And that was the problem with it.
Yep. So that's a very specific problem, which the author should control, right? And so if you set up your series ahead of time, that you're doing a heroine's journey, you know that from your skeleton blurb, this is what we're doing. If you don't, then you can get caught on these things that take you off track into a different place. So to me, Divergent's a really interesting book to study because it's so structurally sound, right? And clearly people loved book 1 and book 2. And then the ending of book 3 is a bit of a, I mean, I always go that too. It's a spoiler alert, like she dies. You got to know that. That's just how it goes. And since then, I think, like, you think of Ned being killed in the Game of Thrones, right, on the first series, everyone's like, what? Ned died?
But he wasn't the protagonist.
No, he wasn't. But it was still a shocking thing. And so when you kill off a major character, you have to be really careful. You have to think really hard about it. Is it the right thing? Elizabeth George got in trouble. She killed off maybe, like, I don't know, somewhere 10 foot, like one of the books way in. She kills off the inspector's wife. And she's an open series, not the protagonist, secondary character, but had been there for 10, 15 books. I just don't remember where. And, you know, Elizabeth George is a fantastic writer with fantastic books. And when she did that, there was such a reaction from her fans. She had to write another book explaining, I think she called it something like What Came Before. And it's the lead up to the wife being killed and why she was killed and the whole rationale. So she actually had to write another book to get her fans back, right? So that wasn't even a major character. Where when you look at Game of Thrones, major character, but there's so many, there's 9 points of view in that first book. You can get away with killing Ned and not, it's shocking. And everybody's like, oh, what happened? Sorry if you hadn't read Game of Thrones or seen season 1 yet, but well, Ned dies. So, you know, that book got away with it because there was enough other stuff to support it. But if there's not, then your fans get upset, I think, is what it comes down to.
Which is why point of view is one of the questions when you're setting out the series. What point of view strategy are you having for your book? And then maybe perhaps you could have foreshadowed it better if it wasn't just the last book that you've got the dual point of view and you've got combined further into, or maybe even from the beginning that you'd have that so that you'd come to accept it.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's maybe dive into backstory, because you mentioned backstory specifically in Divergent. How can we handle backstory effectively? How can we do it without overwhelming readers or slowing down like the pace of individual stories? But also, the more I write, the more I realize that fundamental pieces of backstory are actually vital to giving enough context and explanation and like validation. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but meaning in the current present time. So yeah, can we talk about backstory?
Yeah, so backstory is fascinating for a series. So when a person reads your first book, they don't know any of the backstory. They know the book description. So whatever, you can give backstory in a book description. So if it's a murder mystery, for example, maybe the murder's already happened and that's in the book description. So you know that backstory as a reader, but that's all the reader's going to know. So when they read book 1, they need a little bit more backstory on the character's background before they start the story, but only stuff related to the story. When they read book 2, particularly in a closed series, they know everything from book 1. They know it all. So you have 2 types of readers in book 2. The people who are picking up book 2, and just because it's a closed series doesn't mean the reader won't start somewhere in your series. And I'll tell you, I started The Woman Who Goes Through Jamie, Back Through Time.
Yes.
Super famous.
Amber in Dragonfly and Amber, the lady.
No, not that one. Not that.
That's not
no. Anyway, okay. I started book 3 in the series because I was in the Frankfurt airport and I had a long flight and I wanted a big book. So
Outlander.
Outlander. Yes. Outlander.
Yeah.
I know. So I think I read book 3 first because that's what was in the airport bookstore and it was really big. That was my criteria because I'm thinking, I got 12 hours. I need something serious here. So I bought this book and thought, oh, wow, that was good. And okay, then obviously went back and got book 1 and book 2, but I read it out of order. So as a writer, you have to be prepared that there will be people who read book 2, book 3, whatever, without having read the first one. So the trick is in a closed series is to put enough backstory that the reader who has read book 1 is not bored with it, but the reader who hasn't has enough to know. So to do that, you go back to book 1 and you pull out what are the main events in your inciting incident, plot point 1, middle plot point 2, and the climax. And those are the pieces that you need to put in. And then you have a choice. Do you redescribe a lot of it, or do you just put hints at it? And that depends on your type of book. And if you keep your backstory to that, you've given your reader enough to know what they need to know from book 1. They need to know that the protagonist succeeded or failed at the main story goal in book 1 and where that, because that's going to position them to where they are in the series goal. So that's the trick for backstory in a closed series and in an open series.
In an open series, again, Julia Quinn is amazing because in book 2, she always hints, well, there's a much bigger story that such and such doesn't know about. So Anthony in book 2 thinks about women's honor and then he mentions a duel. He never mentions his sister's name, but there's a collusion for all the readers who have read book 1 and they're like, I'm in the know. I know all of that. So it really builds that reader's, enjoyment factor and draws them in. But then also someone who hasn't read book 1's like, I want to go and read that. And then in book 3, Benedict and Sophie discuss Lady Whistledown's mention of Anthony's marriage and how she doesn't know the whole story, Lady Whistledown. And then this sets up the collusion again. This sets up the in the know, but it also says there's a big story there. So if you have read it, you're feeling fantastic. And if you haven't read it, you're like, well, when I finish this one, I'm going to go back and read the other one. And so it's absolutely structurally brilliant because it makes sense that they would be commenting on these aspects because they'd be thinking about them as characters. But from a reader's point of view, it piques interest or builds in that I'm in the in crowd. I know what's going on here with this backstory. But it always comes, like Kristina said, from those big pivotal moments in the previous stories. And you can find it really quickly from those scenes. What is the main, what would they be thinking about the characters at the beginning of each new book in a series?
I think this is really interesting. One of the things that I had to work on and develop was my ability to work with backstory, because context, I think, is like, in terms of Clifton strengths, context is like my 33 or something, I think. So I don't like, if it's from before, forget it. I'm not interested. But so I went completely the other way. And in structuring this trilogy, I have ended up writing 2 romance stories in one. And one of them is set in the past about 2 other characters. But what readers will find out when they get to the end of book 3 is that the backstory meets the present story. And so it is like, if I can pull it off, it's going to be masterful. But basically, yeah. And all the characters tie together and all of the storylines tie together, but nobody really knows why we've got this. I mean, we know why there's the second story because one of the characters is there in the present time. But anyway, yeah, I love, and this comes back to structure, right? Playing with structure. Before, but I never really paid much attention to backstory, but now backstory is front story almost in this book, which is that's what I wanted to do, was play with structure and backstory and see what I could do. Okay, so let me ask you one more question before we do the ultimate podcast question. Subplots. Talk to me about subplots. What can we do better with them? How can we really maximize their use, make them work for us? Let's talk about backstory.
Okay.
Subplots.
Subplots.
I've
Okay.
still got backstory in my head after talking about it.
So we talked about the skeleton blurb for your main plot. If you create a skeleton blurb for your subplots as well, you need to know what that story is. And the subplot has to have a story arc. It may not have all the story arc scenes depending on how big a subplot it is, but it needs an inciting incident and it needs a climax. It has to go through that process. And if we look at Fourth Wing, so the main plot is in book one is Violet has to use her intelligence to becoming a cadet. Otherwise, she's going to die because she's not very strong. She doesn't have a dragon yet. She doesn't have all the assets the other cadets yet. So her first struggle is to survive that first year as a dragon rider. That's her main goal. The subplot is her romance with Tobias. No, Tobias, this other book with Xaden. The romance is the subplot, and they have a meet cute. They have a plot point one where there's serious attraction. They have a middle plot point two, and they have the climax. So, and those scenes, when you outline what's the main event in those story arc scenes for that subplot, then you look at your main subplot and you look at where are you going to put those in. And so to make the book super strong, it's a structurally brilliant series too, but to make it super strong, so the inciting incident for the main plot for Violet, who's the main character, before the book starts, her mother takes her from being a scribe, which is basically you working in a library, gives her 6 months to train because she's now going to become a dragon rider. So that's her inciting incident. Her life is completely changed before book one. The inciting incident of the romance is when Violet and Xaden meet at the parapet right before she's going to cross. And that's where they see each other for the first time. And so that gives the reader, because the inciting incident already happened, and we start the book with Violet like rushing off to become this cadet, we get an inciting incident early on. And so it's brilliantly structured that you feel satisfied. Okay, this has happened. And then the next subplot, of course, is Violet's relationship with her dragon Taryn, right? And they have a meet cute of when they first meet. This is where her supernatural story arc comes through. And again, you do the story arc scenes for those, and you look at right before plot point one, where she meets, or plot point one, where she bonds with Taryn. That's plot point one of her supernatural journey. Right before that is her inciting incident with that dragon where he speaks in her head. They're not bonded yet, but speaks in her head. And so it comes before. And then when you analyze it and you do the story arc scenes for the main plot, the romance, the supernatural, you can see how they all fit together. And that's how you weave them. And so it comes right back to all of the story arc scenes, who then typically, a lot of times, plot point two for all of the plots are the same, and the climax. They kind of come together and off you go. And it's why the book feels like it's going from plot point two forward.
Have you done your Clifton Strengths yet?
No. Why?
I bet you have analytical, because my friends that I talk to who have high analytical are extraordinarily good at story structure. It's just like my friends who have high input are very good at characterization. Like different strengths show through in different areas of story. People with high activator are very good at pacing, extremely fast-paced books. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I'm just geeking out.
Well, that's interesting. And that's why Lucy and I write so well together, because we're so different and have different story strength knowledge. And then we just combine it and do it together. And I don't know what she would be on Clifton Strengths, but.
Have you done them?
No.
Oh God, I really want. If you ever do them, please let me know, because I'm
we'll send it to
fascinated to see what you get. Did you want to talk about subplots in terms of open series?
The subplots in open series are fantastic because you'll finish off the story. So if it's a murder mystery, then it's found out of who's the. But if you want to keep people coming back, there could be a love triangle that you keep on weaving in. Which story are they going to be together in? Who are they going to choose? Stephanie Plum does that brilliantly throughout. That you can constantly trying to guess which way that subplot is going to work through the story, and so that you've got that connection connection, because you don't have to answer a subplot if it's across the series. If it's within the book, you'll want to answer it. But if it's across the series, you can keep it open, and that keeps questions open so that you've got people going in an open series from one story to the next to the next. So it's very exciting.
Okay, amazing. Well, this is the Rebel Author Podcast. So tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
So funny, you know what? I tossed and turned last night thinking, what am I going to say to that question? Because you've asked me this 3 times already, right? So here's what I came up with. When I was in grade 8, sitting in my classroom, and the teacher came in, and the provincial athletic tournament thingy was going on. I forget what it was called at the time, too long ago. But this team, there was a relay team of speed skating, and one of the girls had hurt themselves and couldn't skate. And so they came into the classroom and said, well, this is tomorrow. Can anyone skate? And so I thought, yeah, I can skate. Of course, I skated with my brother's skates. Like, anyway, I thought, yeah, I can skate. You know, I was on a girls' hockey team and fine. So in the morning, my dad says to me, okay, now don't be disappointed. These people are super trained. This is what they're doing. Just go and do your best. It's all fine, no matter what happens. I took my brother's skates, went off to this thing, and our relay team won.
No way!
And I got out there. I went first. They're like, well, put her first and maybe we can recover. And there I was in my brother's skates, and just flew. And I guess because I'd skated with my brother for so long. So we won this great big trophy. And so the team let me take it home. And I remember running home down my street. You know, I got off the bus and running home because I really wanted to show my dad that. And so that's my rebel thing of, okay, I have no skill set, no talent, no training, but yeah, I'll do it.
I love that. It's the nothing to lose mentality.
Right. You're like, all right, I'll just do that. Yep.
I
that was my one
love
glory
it.
in sports. I have one. That's it. Grade 8.
Lucy, do you have a rebellion?
I asked my husband, because I was also a little bit like, oh my gosh. And my husband said to me, Lucy, your whole life is a rebellion, that you can't think of one because everything is rebellious about you. And I was like, okay. And he's like, well, perhaps, you're researching your latest book, and maybe talk about what you're doing for the research. And I no longer wear bras because I'm researching on how to fight in a corset. So I've now converted in the last 2 months, and I stealth my corsets. So they're not on show to everyone, but I am stealthing with my corset, and I walk around quite happily in a Victorian corset, just steel boned and everything else like that. And yes, so that's my rebellion. Gone with the bra and bring on the corset.
Oh my God, I fucking love that. Please tell me you are sharing the corset somewhere that on social media or something. That's fucking epic. Like, that is literally my favorite thing.
I got to see one. She shared it with me.
We are on radio. We are on radio, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
See that.
Oh my God, it's amazing. It's so funny because I am not girly at all. I don't wear dresses, but I would absolutely go back to the Victorian era to have a bustle and a corset, because I just think they make a woman's body curve into the curves that, look the best, in my opinion. I like curvy bodies. I think that's the way that we're supposed to be built. Okay, anyway, tell everyone where they can find out more about you, your book, Fictionary, the courses, the community, anything else that you would like to add.
Yeah, so fictionary.co is the company. Our books are online everywhere. You can, just type in how to write a series, you'll find it, or K Stanley or L Cooke, Cooke. We have an online community at fictionary.circle.so, and it's free to everybody. And Lucy and I are in there every day. So if you want to chat with us, that's the best place to find us, because that's where we like to talk to people. We get to talk to people live and in chat, and it's really fun.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, thank you to all of the show's listeners and all of the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You are listening to Kristina Stanley and Lucy Cooke, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. Next week, I'm joined by Jason Pinter, also known as A.L. Brody, and we will be talking all about monster romance. And yes, tentacle dongs are mentioned. So join me next week for that. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.